Hello and welcome to our first episode of the Morrison Run, the comic book podcast where we read and discuss everything by Grant Morrison. My name is Bertie.
My name's Leon.
And this is Angwin.
Today we're giving our thoughts, facts and commentary on all 12 issues of All-Star Superman. This is going to be a pretty big episode, we have a lot to say about it, so we're just going to go straight into the discussion.
So All-Star Superman, it came out in 2005, it's drawn by Frank Quitely, and it was part of this initiative of All-Star, which ended up only being two comics. It was All-Star Superman and All-Star Batman and Robin, which is quite controversial, quite infamous.
Probably why the line ended, though.
Probably.
That was Frank Miller, right?
It was Frank Miller, and it was drawn by Jim Lee. So it's probably like...
It should have been amazing.
It should have been
It should have been the greatest comic book of all time.
But that got cancelled halfway through as well.
Yeah. Really famous for "I'm the goddamn Batman."
Yeah. Which is kind of awesome.
That is a hard line. But we're speaking too much on Batman. All-Star Superman. What are everyone's thoughts?
I think this is really good.
Fair.
I think everything everyone says about it is true.
Mm-hmm,
You know.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's great. I'm a fan of Grant Morrison, so
yeah.
I enjoyed it a lot. And
I'm also a large fan of Grant Morrison. However, I don't want to be contrarian, but I was somewhat disappointed. Might be the wrong word, but I was surprised by my reading of All-Star Superman. I did it all in one sitting, which most people do it all in one sitting. But I think I expected, because I understand the concept is very famous. You know, you take an almost all-powerful being and you give them, a time for them to die, right? You give them a ticking clock, and they do, and him being omnibenevolent, him being Superman, he does everything he can to try and make the world okay with him gone. And I expected a deep exploration of that, but it seemed a lot more episodic. And I think that really lends itself to the comic medium, and I thought it was very good, but it wasn't what I was expecting. And
I was going to say, because I read this, I kind of started by reading 2 issues a night this week, and then yesterday I read 4 issues or something, but I've read it before, and I also was reading it kind of day by day, and I think it lends itself to that more.
Yeah.
Even though it's talked about as a Superman graphic novel, but it's not like Dark Knight Returns or something like that, where it is a graphic novel. It's written as a comic book that happens to only be 12 issues and has an ending.
Yeah, I think we were saying before that it would be a good last season of a Superman show.
Yeah.
It is, you can go in as a beginner, but there's a narrative theme and then quite distinct episodic segments in this story.
Yeah, I think All-Star Superman is actually a very fitting name, because even though maybe it is not the most streamlined, non-episodic structure, I think it hits all the big points of a Superman story, all the big names, all the important themes are in it.
In the notes, Grant Morrison talks about using the name All-Star literally, because it's about there's a lot of talk about the sun and stars.
Yeah, that's
and
quite interesting actually.
Solar Superman, which we'll get to later. But
that's fair.
It's the real world context that they were just getting their biggest stars writing these famous characters.
I guess so, yeah. It's kind of unfortunate. It's called All-Star because it's based on All-Star Comics, which was an old DC Comics series, and that's where Wonder Woman debuted, but she never got an All-Star comic. All-Star, a 2000s All-Star comic.
That's quite interesting.
Should we get into the first issue?
Yes.
Of course.
So as a summary, Superman's tricked into flying into the center of the sun by Lex Luthor. He saves everyone, but in doing so has supercharged his cells, creating this looming fear of death, which will be present throughout the comic. Does a good job of establishing Superman and Lex Luthor's dynamic, but it is just kind of that, really, I think. Are there any other good key points?
At the start, we get a super quick, a 1-page telling of Superman's origin, and it literally says doomed planet, desperate scientists, last hope, kindly couple, which I think is...
It's All-Star. It hits all the...
Great. It's great. I think that's a great opening.
It hits all the big points.
And then right after that, we see a massive double-page spread of Superman drawn by Frank Quitely, and I think that's a great way to open.
Agreed. Him flying in front of the sun. He has quite an interesting look in this spread. He looks He also looks very majestic in front of the sun. That's him at almost his most powerful. But he looks like he's carrying a big burden, which I guess is, the theme of the whole run. He is at his most powerful, but also in a way at his weakest, and has the most responsibility.
I think these first pages as well are great examples of Frank Quitely's use of scale. Frank Quitely's great at making Superman seem so small in this vast open space. Mm-hmm. There are some tall vertical panels where he's tiny and getting closer and closer. The first page has these long horizontal panels where we kind of go from close-ups to just space. I think that's something Frank Quitely's great at.
Yeah.
And Frank Quitely's great in general.
It might be a good idea to introduce all of the side characters, the very famous Superman side characters, to people who maybe aren't as familiar with them. So obviously there is Lois Lane, Superman's love, and an almost wife in All Star Superman.
Yeah.
We also have the Superman's best friend Jimmy Olsen. Something I really liked about about this is that Jimmy Olsen gets called Jimmy Olsen a lot more than I thought he would. It's I think it's quite friendly, calling someone by their full name.
Yeah.
I was reading the notes, and Grant Morrison talks about Jimmy Olsen. He didn't want to write Jimmy Olsen as a buffoon because he thought it didn't make sense.
Yeah,
it's
that's fair.
Jimmy has done so many things and is in Superman's world, and Superman respects Jimmy as a friend.
Of course, yeah.
So
it'd be strange if he was just some idiot. Yeah, just some blubbering idiot. Yeah. Then there's also all the other members of the Daily Planet.
Yeah, but before that, we get introduced to these space scientists, and we see our first look at Mr. Quinton.
Mr. Quinton. So we discussed this, but I thought Mr. Quinton was a character that existed prior to All-Star Superman, but apparently he was made for this comic.
Yeah, and I think definitely made as a parallel to Lex Luthor.
Yes,
they have even the shape of his jacket is the
same-ish color scheme.
Yeah, and then same-ish face with longer hair and weird-looking goggles. I think there was a popular fan theory I've heard that is a redeemed Lex from the future, which I don't really think lines up with the story. And Grant Morrison said that they were intended to be a parallel, but I think Grant Morrison liked the theory. I think it was Clark's ultimate goal in this to kind of redeem Lex Luthor before dying. So I think that would be quite interesting, and it's interesting to just have that kind of thought, even if it's not true.
That makes sense.
In the notes, Grant says, visually he combines elements of David Bowie, Willy Wonka, Joseph of the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat, Byron, and George Washington.
Yeah, and that's all you want in a character.
That is what you want. That's what you want in anyone, really.
But they also say Leo Quinton represents the good scientific spirit, which is exactly what you guys were saying.
But I just think the introduction of that character, it's not a character that Superman or Jimmy are meeting for the first time, I believe. I don't think so.
It doesn't seem like that.
No,
it does seem like, this guy back from the 60s.
Yeah, of course.
Doing all this crazy stuff.
What I find really interesting about Leo Quinton is that obviously Lex Luthor is defined by his pride and his ego, and the fact that there exists a being who, even as humble as Superman is, Lex views as above him. But Leo Quinton isn't a profusely humble character. He's not, egotistical in the same way that Lex is, but he carries himself with grace. And I think it's interesting that the foil was more to do with what they do with them, with their abilities, rather than their personality. Because I think you could argue that's maybe because this comic book is very explicit about Superman's morals. He says that it doesn't matter what you say, it's what you do is important. In the same way that if Lex Luthor was really impolite, if he was really rude, but he did everything he could to help humanity, he would be a redeemable person, or at least in the eyes of Grant Morrison when writing this. But so I think it's very interesting that that's the way that Leo is depicted in this. But so to continue, the other members of the Daily Planet, we have Leon. Do you wanna
Perry White is
Cat Grant.
Yeah. Perry White's the like editor-in-chief. Yeah,
boss
it
man.
literally says that.
Yeah.
Cat Grant. What's this guy's name? The guy with the mustache.
I forget. He's in
has
My
a-
Adventures with
I know.
Superman.
He has a 2-piece.
He's
Alright.
yeah. These guys, they're just other reporters and stuff at the Daily Planet. It's a fun little side cast.
Yeah.
I used to watch Supergirl, and I think in that, Cat Grant was the head of the Daily Planet.
Oh yeah,
First
I do
season.
remember that.
Yeah, so I always thought that was her role, but apparently not.
Could I put this? Yeah, I just can't really balance it up well. On the phone.
For our audio listeners, we have 3 large copies of All Star Superman. We're trying to balance them on a very small table corner. Yeah. And in the first issue, essentially what it does is it introduces the concept of the whole run, which is that Superman, because of Lex Luthor, is dying, right? Tragically, he is dying because of excess. He has too much. He's been overcharged by the sun. The sun should be his source of power, but Lex has found a way to turn this great power against him. And Leo Quinton does some tests on him, and they find the fact that he is dying, and at some time in the future will pass.
And it really seems to emphasize how much Lex Luthor hates Superman. Like, they really put a lot of work into showing that relationship.
There's some kind of monster that's on this spaceship that Lex is mind controlling.
Yeah.
And I thought it was really well said. Like, the monster, as voiced by Lex, calls Superman a fascist and then says, "No right at all to stand in the way of my self-realization." And then Superman says, "You misunderstand. I'm here to help you with that." And I think that's just really good. Like, Lex Luthor sees Superman as standing in the way all the time, and all Superman's really trying to do is help.
Is help, exactly. And I think it's very interesting, and we'll get into this a bit more later. I think it's very interesting that Lex Luthor chooses to call Superman a fascist, because All-Star Superman is not a story that shies away from that conversation. Explicitly, in Earth Q, which we'll go into later, which is meant to be a depiction of our world, Grant represents the fact that even a world wherein Superman doesn't exist, we inevitably will reach some sort of concept of Superman. The final panel from Earth Q being a depiction of Friedrich Nietzsche writing Earth Q's version of "Thus Spoke Zarathustra." So it's clear that Grant Morrison doesn't want to shy away from this controversial depiction and conversation surrounding Superman. And I think it's very interesting that Lex Luthor, despite his ego, despite his very clear authoritarian leanings, thinks that it's an appropriate insult, an appropriate moniker to give Superman as a fascist in his hatred.
So,
I think this first issue, after the kind of central conflict with the monster possessed by Lex Luthor, we learn that Superman's got cancer. And is it after this, Superman gets a bit of a tour where we see these bizarro worker drones, and I think that introduces the core thing of the whole story, which is like what comes after Superman.
Yeah. Because this world's come to rely on him for all the things they need.
And I think every issue is going to kind of approach that question in a different way.
Yeah. Agreed. Yeah, and then following this, there's this very funny scene of Fred Perry saying that if Clark Kent isn't here in 5 seconds, he's going to fire him. And Clark Kent is rushing across all of Metropolis, putting on his suit very quickly, obviously, bumbling his way there. And he gets there just in time.
Frank Whiteley drawing that as like a time lapse on one panel.
That's really good.
It's great.
Yeah, I think it's a very funny depiction of that.
There's I think it's a good time to talk about like the way Frank Whiteley draws Superman and Clark.
Yeah, I agree.
It's like they sort of, I think, wanted to de-emphasize the idea of Superman as someone who's like super macho strong and that could almost be scary. It's Superman looks comforting. He doesn't have like super defined muscles. He looks big. It's more adjacent to kind of the Christopher Reeve version from like the 70s.
I did want to say this is Christopher Reeve's Superman. It doesn't look like Christopher Reeve's, but the just the way the transition from Clark to Superman, where he's like struggling to put on his tie and stumbling over as Clark, and then being this like, heroic. His posture's great when he's Superman.
Yeah. It's very voicey.
I don't think the dynamics between this version of Clark and Lois and Clark and Luthor are the same as the Christopher Reeves interpretation, but it does borrow a lot from that interpretation.
We see, the front cover of issue 1, it's just got Superman sitting down in front of the sun, right?
Oh, this is so iconic.
That's so iconic, and
of all time.
he just looks so relaxed. It's kind of that's it. That was part of the idea that Superman should be relaxed. If he's all powerful,
exactly.
He should be comfortable and relaxed. And
I think he needs to sit up a bit straight though, because it's going to hurt his back if you.
True. But I guess it just shows how relaxed he is. Like in this position, he's so calm and cool and collected.
The famous story is that this cover comes from when I think Grant Morrison was talking about they were struggling to figure out how to write Superman, but they're at a convention or something like that, and they saw a cosplayer dressed as Superman sat like that on the front cover.
That's really interesting.
And I think the story, as I heard it, was they started asking Superman questions like, how's Lois and stuff, and he answered candidly in character, and Grant was like, this is Superman, this is who my Superman will be.
Really cool. Superman is real, and Grant Morrison has met him. But yeah, following this, there is a section where Lex Luthor is arrested for attempting to, I think in the beginning, blow up the sun. Because Quentin is attempting to map out the sun. That's kind of the whole premise. That's the reason why there's a drone on the sun. That's the reason why they have to be saved, and that's the reason why Lex Luthor is able to poison Superman. And Lex Luthor is arrested for crimes against humanity as well as murder, as attempted murder. Clearly, trying to attempt to kill Superman.
We see during that sequence of that page, we see. It's like the title pages for each issue. Mm-hmm. It's towards the end. I noticed this smaller copy doesn't have the text.
That's quite interesting.
But here it's like a movie poster.
Yeah. Wow.
Which is quite interesting. Or maybe like the end of a TV show. It's
Well, they are split into episodes.
Yeah. It's quite. They even have DC general audiences. Like it's like a parody.
Parental advisory.
So that's really interesting.
Yeah. I think it's good time to bring this up. I find it very interesting that All-Star Superman has recently been, well, not recently, but semi-recently been reprinted as part of the DC Black Label. Because obviously the Black Label is used for more transgressive, like edgy stories. And, now that we've read All-Star Superman, obviously, it tackles heavy themes, but I wouldn't describe it as transgressive, which I think opens up this conversation of how approachable is All-Star Superman as a story to general audiences.
I think it's pretty definitively like at least one of the Superman stories. Yeah. And I think there's maybe other Superman stories that are more simple, but I think this one, even though it's more complicated, I think it is very approachable.
Yeah, agreed.
I think the first 2 issues, they catch you up on Superman and Lex's dynamic, Superman and Lois's dynamic. I think that's really everything you need as like a base for Superman.
Yeah, that's fair.
And then it is filled with references to all these other characters, but I think you can kind of just pick them up and enjoy them, and as you go along, like you might not know who Parasite is, but it's a big monster.
Yeah, it's a big
exactly.
Obviously you need to know who Superman is, all the story beats, but almost all people reading All-Star Superman will know all these things.
I also a lot of elements in here in the whole comic seem like things from 60 stories, and some of them are, but a lot of them are things that Grant Morrison invented for this comic. So it doesn't really need you to know loads about comic book history. I mean, Bizarro's in it, but I think most of what's done with like the Bizarro world is new.
The Underverse and that sort of thing.
Something they said in the notes, which I keep referencing the notes, it's a bunch of writings at the back of the edition I have, at least. They said in the notes that every time Clark does something clumsy, he's secretly saving someone.
Yeah, I think that's so cool.
And we see that in this epilogue with Lois and Clark.
Yeah. because he's walking home with Lois.
Yeah.
And at the end, he reveals that he's Superman.
I like this dialogue. Someone shouting at Lois, "Your boyfriend's an idiot."
And then I love. He says, "I have something to tell you." We see him open his shirt, and then it just shows the groceries that Lois was carrying on the floor.
Do you want to hear my conspiracy theory? So in The Godfather, oranges represent death. Not to spoil The Godfather. Whenever there's whenever there's murder, there's always orange, the color orange involved. And I don't know how big a fan of The Godfather Grant Morrison is, but it could be here. Revealing the fact that Superman is dying, and Lois is going to find out.
Okay. Yeah. That's cool.
Yeah.
I'm looking at the cover to issue 2 now, which we're about to go into. I think. I really like how short Superman's cape is. And it's like this in this whole story because it adds the silliness of it. It's not like a grand cape. It's like it's like a silly little thing.
I think this is a really good design for Superman overall. I think the only big change from like the classic design is Superman's proportions, which we've talked about already. But I just think stretching out the logo looks great. Like just like this massive
agreed
crest.
Something else about the cover of issue 2 that Grant also said in the notes is that they wanted to go back to old school style of covers where it would show a situation, it would show action. It wasn't just like a glamour shot.
That's cool.
There's 2 glamour shots. One is issue 1 and one is later on we see the whole world in his
never
hands.
ending. Yeah.
But every other issue has an action shot from the comic.
Yeah. That's really cool.
Should we give a brief overview of this issue 2? I mean, in summary, it is just Lois getting a tour around the Fortress of Solitude while Superman attempts to explain that he is really Clark Kent. I think that's fun. And then Lois gets exposed to alien gas, which makes her try and shoot Superman. But then they're fine.
Because she's convinced that he's going to try and make a race of super babies or something.
And then there's the reveal of Lois's birthday present at the end. But we can just get into that when we get around to that.
This whole issue contrasts her journalistic cynicism with Clark's sort of optimism. She's kind of she's like, there's got to be something bad here.
Like, but he's just good natured. So,
I think that's like very fair because there was some weird stuff in there.
That is true. But the Sun Eater is introduced in this episode. One of the best characters. The best characters.
I think this is really cute. Superman flying Lois's car to the North Pole.
What this introduces, which I think is really cool, is like Lois is like, she's as much as she's scared of the Fortress of Solitude, she's almost more scared of the implication that Superman is Clark Kent. There's a bit in this episode where Lois is like the most scary thing is the chance that there's a bit of Clark Kent in Superman. There's a bit of the bumbling idiot in who should be the champion of the human race, and I think that's very interesting. It kind of leads into the cynicism thing she's got.
I also kind of forgot this issue has captions from Lois's perspective. I don't know if we get that again. Maybe we do in the issue after this.
I'm not sure.
But it's like it's definitely at least short-lived. And I think that's interesting because it adds to the episodic thing where in a normal comic book run you'd get like one issue that's from someone's perspective and the rest isn't.
I mean, we
like
soon get the Jimmy Olsen issue as well.
Yes. But no, I think it's really cool because in a lot of these stories where it's Superman's relationship with another character, it's from the other character's perspective, which I think is very interesting. Where we get those perspectives. But essentially he flies her in her sedan all the way to the Fortress of Solitude and reveal the Superman key, which is under a very comical welcome mat randomly in the North Pole. And she's confused of why he just leaves the key lying around into potentially the most important fortress on the planet. And it's because he reveals, quite famously, that it's made from, I think, the center of stars.
A super dense dwarf star material and weighs 500,000 tons.
Okay, I didn't catch that. So like that's again the all-star thing. It's all about stars.
Yeah, exactly.
All of the stars.
Yeah, exactly. Shout out Scissor.
Shout out.
Yeah.
But yeah, and then reveals the whole like Fortress of Solitude. You know,
Yeah.
I find it so funny that he's just got like wax models of his friends
on a chessboard, which is kind of weird. Like,
That was a thing in Superman and the Authority by Grant Morrison, which I won't talk too much about now. He's got wax models of all his villains lined up, and then he's walking past and like, I don't remember having a Solomon Grundy, and then Solomon Grundy jumps out.
that is that's funny.
Anyway, yeah, there's some cool things in this like big wide shot we've got of the Fortress of Solitude.
Just first thing I'm noticing, there's a big robot. Is that the same robot from later? There's another robot.
No,
it's different.
that's Mechanomat. There's a different robot.
This robot looks kind of like Frank Quitely's robots from We 3, also written by Grant Morrison.
Interesting.
It's not the same, but it's just got a similar aesthetic.
That's pretty
He's
cool.
got a plane that seems like it was going from the States to Colombia.
Oh.
What?
Yeah,
Cool.
that's what it says on here. Colombia and then US.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. But yeah,
I don't know why he's got that.
he then shows Lois his gravity gun, which will be important later.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Well, I do want to say as well, he's got the Bad Penny, which seems to be the other side of Batman's coin from his cave. I didn't know that was
that's
a
really cute.
thing. Is
I
that
don't,
the
yeah, I don't
Joker
know what's
or
up
not?
with that. It says Joker.
Batman is not in this comic book, but he's referenced quite a few times
Yeah,
as
he
one
is.
of Superman's closest friends.
There's a wax model of him.
There is.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Is there anything else of interest here? We get some of this explained later, don't we? So
But we see Kandor in a glass.
This is one of my favorite
Casing.
aspects of this story, the whole Kandor stuff. I think it's very interesting because to give some context, because Kandor and Earth Q, I think, are both introduced in this episode. Kandor is a large Kryptonian city that was shrunk by Brainiac, and so one of Superman's final labors before he dies is to bring it back to its normal size.
And I believe that is a classic thing. Like I think that is from old Superman comics.
That makes sense.
what, it being shrunk down? Or?
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. But
We've got these super robots walking around as well.
Yeah, we see them in the trailer for the new movie.
yeah,
See
well,
them
so
a
the
few
super
times.
robots are kind of like Superman's helpers, right?
Yeah.
Like we get a lot of characterization for Robot 7 quite randomly.
Right.
Yeah. Robot 7 may be the favorite, maybe the runt of the litter in a way. But yeah, we get these robots. Yeah, they come into play quite a bit. If we turn the page,
Right.
it's Lois's like her inner thoughts again. It's her commentary.
Seems like her morning routine, and then right. Okay, we've got the Sun Eater here. Superman, he is welding a star. All star. Stars.
Yes, I think it's really cool.
I don't need to point that out every time. now.
yeah. Just know that the All-Star refers to stars. Stars are a big thing in this comic book. Yeah. But he's welding a star, which I think is really cool. I feel like for some reason, like a blacksmith role, like for some reason I'm getting pictures of like the Elden Ring trailer or whatever. Okay. Blacksmith role for me almost seems like very creator. So it's like a very strong artisan imagery. And obviously like throughout this comic book, Superman will create a lot of things. He will create life during this comic book. In this episode, I think it's revealed that he's created life. And essentially in this whole episode, he just gives Lois a tour around the fortress.
I believe creating life was one of his 12 labors.
Yeah.
I don't want to keep referencing the 12 labors before we actually get to that part of the story, but
yeah.
I think in this episode the 12 labors are introduced.
I think it's when
I think it's
time
the next
traveling
one.
guy. Yeah, I forgot his name. Sorry.
Lois and Superman have a date.
Yeah.
And
For some reason, Superman's in black and white.
because at the end she says, it was the first time I'd really seen our whole freakish relationship in stark black and white. So I think that's like all that black and white is. It's just kind of reflecting that line.
She's just like, struggling.
And they're on a... Did Superman steal the Titanic? Is that what...
No, I think he has the menu from the Titanic or something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I did read this the other day, but I've kind of forgotten the details of the Titanic.
I think, I mean, it's possible it wasn't Frank Quitely's choice because it could have been colorist. But the black and white thing, I think, is just a really good example of Frank Quitely going out of his way to do like a weird artistic decision that doesn't need to happen, which I feel like
it's a little gag.
he does all the time. Like I don't know, like there's so much like cool paneling and stuff that he'll just throw in.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I think on this page, it's this really shows Lois's cynicism. It shows, like, I think she's writing to herself. I guess perhaps her form of like personal therapy, getting her thoughts on a screen, and she's just like pouring out all these fears and all this like insecurity that Clark Kent could be Superman.
Superman looks at himself in a mirror, which reflects a lot of other stuff we're gonna see.
Yeah,
in terms of Bizarro,
yeah. Agreed.
Stuff like that.
The effect of a Superman being there and then him not being there later.
So first introduction to the bandaged Superman.
The unknown Superman of AD 4500. I get the number right.
Which, having a question mark on the logo is just really cool.
That's awesome. Actually just cool.
Yeah.
But yeah. And I think like this 80s, so this obviously Superman from the future, right? Or a Superman from the future. And Lois, and he says that even though the connection's bad, he'll grant her like one question. And Lois's first question immediately is, will Superman and I have children? Which, tragically, the future Superman isn't able to answer. I guess foreshadowing the tragedy of the whole story.
But then he says, who was J-Lo?
So, I think it's meant to be a joke. I think he wants a question for them. Yeah. For her. I guess, Jennifer Lopez, right? Yeah. I guess it's meant to be a little gag, like Superman from the future really wants to know who J-Lo is.
But I think considering what we learn about this Superman later, I think he might be joking.
Yeah. Or it's like a cover or something. Yeah, it's something. But yeah, at this point, Lois goes crazy and wants to shoot Superman with a gravity gun.
Well, is this the kryptonite gun?
Because the
kryptonite gun.
She's seen that him creating a thing in his lab, and he's like studied her body and stuff. Yeah. So she's like, this can't be something good.
This can't run.
Yeah.
Which I think is fair. This is fair. We don't want to be too normative on this podcast, but we do think that you probably shouldn't have detailed notes on your partner's body.
I think just considering like the Lois is running around like in a dress barefoot. Frank Whiteley doesn't like sexualize her or anything. He draws women quite respectfully in this comic, especially.
Yeah, and then Lois shoots Superman.
Yeah,
and he's
cool with it.
There's this beautiful panel where he's like got this like model physique. He's just like, ow. he looks really good. It's revealed that I guess because his cells are overcharged, like green kryptonite no longer affects him.
We don't see it happen on page, but I think he like flicked his hair back afterwards. That's the vibe I'm getting from.
Definitely. Oh, but yeah. And then at this point, Superman reveals why he's brought Lois here for her birthday.
And he's made her own Superman costume.
Yeah.
And we can see on this page, the cover of the next one, we see it again.
And the vial, yes. So Superman, so she could be Superman for a day.
Yeah,
that was revealed at the end of this one. So
yes.
It's his genes in a bottle.
Yeah.
Which seems a bit dangerous, but
yeah, it's fine.
I think
that's cute.
I think Superman was being a bit like creepy in this. Like I think he was right intentions, but he could have gone about it a bit better.
Yeah.
Like, just the way he came across.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah,
don't be leaving doors open to like rooms of.
I get what you're saying.
That's the Clark in him, which Lois talks about in the issue. That's so true. Yeah. Well, what do you guys think about the design of Lois's suit?
I think it's really cool.
I think it's very old school comics, and I like how it's not. It'd be very easy to do such a simple like Superwoman.
Yeah,
it doesn't look like that.
That's true.
It's like
I like the big logo like just around the neck,
like the brooch.
The circular S is really cool. We see throughout the comic like in the future a lot of variations on the Superman logo into like Grant Morrison and Frank Whiteley aren't married to the idea that this is Superman's one logo that is from Krypton. That's not really mentioned. It's like it.
I think it's really cool on this next page, like the cover for this next episode. Lois seems so much more natural as a superwoman than Clark does. Like I think it's quite interesting because a lot of like really famous superheroes, their partners tend to be far more confident than they are, and like a lot more like cool and collected. Like you said the same thing for like Mary Jane, right? For example, like Mary Jane's famous, beloved, she's incredibly confident, and Spider-Man is a dork, and it's something similar reflected in this cover for episode 3.
Issue 3 is the main kind of crux of this issue, as we see on the cover, is Lois becoming Superwoman for a day. They fight Krull. In my opinion, my favorite design of any character in the whole comic. I love Krull. Krull is a lot of fun, and then they meet Samson and Atlas, who are sort of time-traveling supermen. And we're introduced to the idea of... They introduced to us the idea of Superman's 12 labors.
Yes.
And
the Ultra Sphinx shows up.
They fight the Ultra Sphinx.
He has to answer the unanswerable question or something.
Yes, he has to... Yeah. Answering the unanswerable question, when they introduce that, it sounds like something bigger, but it's just for this one Ultra Sphinx. He has to answer the unanswerable question.
There's the arm wrestle.
Arm wrestle.
Superman arm wrestles these guys and then
breaks
him and Lois go on a date.
Yeah, exactly.
That's the issue in summary, really.
Yeah. And they have a beautiful little kiss on the moon.
Yeah. That's another full page spread, which Frank Whiteley does beautifully. He does that a lot in the comic. Just like a full page spread with no words.
Yeah.
Normally, I've heard this thing about in comic books. If you do a double page spread, you are meant to maybe put something else in there to make it still feel like you're reading a comic book.
Yeah, I see what you're saying.
Frank Whiteley doesn't do that, or Grant Morrison doesn't do that. But I think it works pretty nicely.
At the end of this episode, while they're looking over Metropolis, Superman tries to ask Lois Lane to marry him, and she falls asleep.
Yeah.
So he puts her to bed. Very cute.
Is it just because she's like tired out from being Superman?
I think she's tired out from doing all the Superman stuff.
Yeah.
So just while we're like talking about this moon bit, I really like how you see like she kicks up the dust, and that's kind of falling with moon gravity. Her hair's kind of also in moon gravity. I just think that's like,
I know what you're saying,
it's well drawn. It's kind of, you can see some kind of motion, and
I agree. I think it's very cool.
Should we rewind a bit on this one?
Yeah, I want about Krull.
Yeah.
Yes.
I love Krull. I think he looks really cool. Krull is this like bright red alien dinosaur looking guy with a bunch of necklaces, and he like picks up some car, and I think Lois and Clark have to stop him from destroying the city or whatever, which they do quite simply and quite easily, which I guess is meant to, I don't know, it's meant to be kind of like an everyday Superman activity.
Yeah.
Ultimately, what happens is this is mostly an introduction for Samson, because Samson's the one that shows up. He fights Krull, he throws him away. Then it introduces Samson and Atlas, who introduce the 12 labors. It's quite interesting. So like Samson and Atlas are both like, let me arm wrestle you for your girlfriend, which is a bit weird. But for some reason, Lois seems into it.
Yeah, I think Lois is quite confident Superman is stronger. Probably wouldn't go along with it if he lost. But
which is true.
I think that's the vibe I'm getting.
Yeah. It's a very, I mean, the whole set of that whole dynamic and even just the characters of Samson and Atlas themselves are very old school comics.
Yeah,
and it's putting them in an old school comic situation, and Lois still goes along with it in a way she would in old school comics, but with a touch more nuance where she feels like a real person.
I know what you're saying.
Yeah,
I see what you're saying. And then there's this, and then for some reason I think Samson gives Lois this necklace, which unless she was a Superwoman, she would be able to wear without dying. I think. Yeah. Radioactive crown jewels that he stole from the Ultra Sphinx, which is a bad idea. Right, because the Ultra Sphinx then shows up later. Because I think the Ultra Sphinx has been chasing them across time.
I'm in the notes. Grant Morrison has like backstories for Samson and Atlas, and also Krull.
Krull the goat.
Should I talk about Krull
I think
first?
Krull's like a subterranean guy.
Yeah. Krull is like... For years I've had the idea that familiar grey aliens might actually be evolved biped dinosaur descendants. Because the idea is like dinosaurs went underground, formed a society where there's a Dinosaur Taranko who rules over everything. But apparently Dinosaur Taranko is like the best ruler they've had. The dinos see him as very lenient, but he's still like kind of a fascist.
Yeah.
So that's apparently what's going on there. And then Samson and Atlas, I believe Samson was used as a character in some old comics or something.
In the Bible as well.
Or in the Bible,
One of the most
obviously.
famous comics of all time.
So I think that Samson is meant to be Samson from the Bible.
Yeah, that which is really cool. Yeah. Really cool.
And however, Atlas, who is like time traveled around, however, Atlas is from the far future.
Interesting.
And happens to be named Atlas.
Yeah.
And has traveled back in time.
Okay.
So that's
I
what's
love
going
these
on
time
there.
travel plots that could be completely avoided by like not stealing a necklace from someone called the Ultra.
I agree.
I think that's very golden age. It's kind of time travel plot.
Yeah.
Why did you do that? Now we have to fix it. Kind of thing. I like
it's quite cute.
that.
Like Samson and Atlas are both trying to like woo Lois Lane, which is obviously in vain.
But Lois Lane didn't like getting taken by the Ultra Sphinx, who has just appeared out of nowhere to take his necklace back.
He's furry, which I didn't realise.
Who?
The Ultra Sphinx.
Yeah, which I guess makes sense. Yeah. And before the Ultra Sphinx shows up, Samson, being a time traveler, reveals a headline: Superman dead. And it's clear that Lois Lane doesn't know yet that Superman's going to die, which, is a fumble. Like, Superman should let Lois know, but obviously you can understand why this is quite a taxing situation. But yeah, and then on the next page, the Ultra Sphinx shows up, right? Very foolish. He picks up Lois Lane by the necklace that was stolen from him, and speaks in this really cool, like, single word, like, speech boxes. Yeah. With this sort of, like, brick pattern. And it's clear that Superman, one of them has to answer the unanswerable question. Yeah.
And the unanswerable question is...
what happens when the unstoppable force meets the immovable object? Which is a classic question.
Yeah.
A classic question. And Superman answers in a way that only he could properly. And he says they both surrender. Clearly a man of peace. And what I find interesting is that, like, obviously it's the unanswerable question, so there's not a right answer. But I think the Ultra Sphinx says that the response is acceptable.
Yeah.
Which I think is interesting. Perhaps it shows... I don't know. I don't know exactly what the Ultra Sphinx...
So it was quite an answerable question. Really.
Yeah. Or it's like... Or maybe the Ultra Sphinx has a different, like metric. Maybe, like, honesty, or maybe something else, which I think is cool.
So that's interesting, because it's not the Sphinx's riddle.
What's the Sphinx's riddle?
Isn't it like... I think the Sphinx's riddle is like... What has like 4 legs when it's young, 4 legs in the morning, 2 legs in the day, and
3 legs at night. Yeah.
So I guess this is the Ultra Sphinx's riddle.
Yeah, an ultra question. Because the first one is like really easy. Everyone knows that one.
But you don't know it unless you know it. But
yeah, obviously. I know what you're saying. I know what you're saying. Yeah.
Like,
because riddles are always like really annoying.
Yeah.
The answer is a person, by the way.
Isn't it a table? Like, you cut off 2 legs and then you attach a new one?
No, tables can't have 2 legs.
Like someone who has a 4-leg table.
It's a person.
It's a 3-leg table.
So the 4 refers to groin, maybe. 2 refers to bipedal human. And the 3rd assumes that you have a walking stick.
Yeah.
It could be 5, though. Like, so maybe Zimmer frames weren't around in the Egyptian era.
True.
Yeah. But then it comes to one of my favourite bits in the whole story, which is this beautiful spread. They're on this, like, cove, and Superman has to arm wrestle Atlas and Samson at the same time. It's clear, the fact that he can do both at the same time, that he's probably going to win. Yeah. So I don't really know why they're challenging him, because I'm pretty sure, like, Superman breaks Atlas's arm. So yeah, which feels like could have been avoided, but I think he's probably just trying to teach him a lesson. And in doing so, this is very anime. I think he arm wrestles them so hard that he like the wind breaks the cove in two or something, which I think is really cool.
Lois gets hit in the head with a rock.
Yeah,
which splits in half. Luckily, it was on the one day where.
yeah, exactly.
So,
but yeah, no. And then there's a Daily Planet story. Greek hero Atlas at Lois party. Atlas scores. Yeah. I imagine with the nurse. Yeah.
They go on a date under the sea.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So they're swimming with some fish.
This is beautiful.
Um,
For some reason, this reminds me of How to Train Your Dragon a little bit. Because obviously,
instead of dragons, it's fish.
No, instead of dragons, it's like flying, like just people.
Yeah,
flying.
right,
Yeah. And then like the very famous moon spread we were talking about.
We talked about that.
Yeah, this is really good. Yeah. And then, a beautiful day, they end it under the sea, they're looking over, and Superman wants to propose to Lois, but she's had a very tiring day, so she falls asleep. So Superman tucks her into bed. Sweet dreams, Superwoman. This is actually one of my favourite episodes in the whole story.
I like the title as well. I think it's just nice.
It's cute. Yeah. Love Kroll, Ultra Sphinx. I really like the way that all the monsters are designed in this story.
You seem to be a very big Kroll fan.
Kroll's cool. I think he looks cool.
The other thing from their notes, Grant said that the Ultra Sphinx is from a lost Egyptian atomic age in the past.
Oh damn!
Yeah,
that's pretty cool actually. Yeah. No, yeah. I also like the design of Samson and Atlas. Because Samson and Atlas have quite more boxy builds than Superman. Like you could argue more masculine builds, and yet Superman breaks her arms or whatever. I think it does show kind of the characterization. Because I guess they're meant to be more macho guys. Superman is more calm, more collected, and I think I think it's a cool decision, artistic decision from Frank Quitely. Yeah.
I like how, if we're moving on to this next issue, the Jimmy Olsen one, your copy has what I assume is the original trade cover with speech bubbles. Jimmy Olsen is saying, if I can't get these crazy future weapons to work, I'm dead, and so is everyone else. Yeah. I think that's just a reference to
really
his,
cool. That's cool.
Jack Kirby or pre-Jack Kirby comics, which is when Jimmy Olsen was really the most popular, I think, as a character.
Yeah.
I think it's a fun throwback to that.
Something I just remembered that was in Grant's notes is they said that Robbie Williams, the musician,
Take That.
Yeah, right?
I think so. Yeah.
Well, he had the movie.
He had the movie.
What was
the movie called? The monkey.
No, it was called A Better Man, but
okay.
It was him, but he was played by a monkey.
What?
Apparently, it was incredible. Genuinely,
Oscar worthy. Fair enough.
Genuinely, people were saying they cried.
Why?
It was a CGI monkey. I
see. Okay.
But
still.
Apparently Robbie Williams asked Frank Quitely to make Jimmy Olsen look a bit like him.
Okay, that's cool.
So Jimmy Olsen looks a bit like Robbie Williams sometimes. In this comic.
Right. Another action shot, which is great.
They said they wanted to use speech bubbles and stuff on every issue or a lot of the issues, but they were told that was a bit too far in terms of the old school thing.
Makes sense.
But I guess they were allowed to use it on this issue.
I just like this as well. It says on the cover, "Is it over for the Superman Olsen team? Superman's turned evil." It reminds me of the first issue of Jack Kirby's Jimmy Olsen. It's Superman's ex-pal, the new Jimmy Olsen, and he's riding on some sort of weird motorbike thing, and he's like, "I'm gonna kill you, Superman."
That's cool.
But,
that's cute.
Yeah, I can't quite remember what that was all about.
What I really like about this, sorry for this, basically Jimmy Olsen is put in charge of Project for a bit, and then there's some construction tomfoolery, and Black Kryptonite is pulled out of some vat, and Superman gets in contact with it. Black Kryptonite makes him evil, so Jimmy Olsen has to turn to Doomsday to beat up Superman.
Yeah,
I forgot that.
Yeah.
I think in his older appearances, every issue he turns into something.
Yeah, which I think
he's either a dragon or he's something else.
My favorite aspect of this comic, this issue rather, is the relationship between Lucy, Jimmy Olsen's girlfriend, and Jimmy. Because I think it shows, because whilst he's funny, he's bumbling like Clark. It shows a level of competency. I think it's quite cool.
I think it's worth noting the first time we see Jimmy in this issue is he's like in drag, which is very Grant Morrison. That's like just
I think
an excuse.
Before Jack Kirby took over, it was a bit almost kind of like Scooby-Doo, you know, he'd like wear a female disguise to like...
Yeah. I see what you're saying.
I don't know, to impress a security guard or something. And I think that's cool. Where it came from originally, this idea, but I think, I like that they've made it a part of his character in a modern comic.
So at the beginning, Lucy, Jimmy's girlfriend, is saying that she's got many other suitors and that she's leaving him because he's incompetent and boring. And he's like, give me a break. I think he's working for Project that day, or he's like being the leader of Project, because I think Quentin's doing something different. I think Quentin's like preoccupied with something else. But yeah, I do like this name, the Superman Olsen War. I think that's a cute name.
I also kind of just like thinking about this as an issue in itself, like this is Grant Morrison doing an issue of Superman's pal Jimmy Olsen.
Yeah.
Which is cool.
I think it's really cute, yeah.
I would love a whole series with that, really.
Yeah, I think it's got a very funny perspective. I think it's interesting how this whole issue, in a weird way, like there's constant conversation about fashion and clothing. Because obviously Jimmy Olsen is a drag at the beginning, and Quentin has quite iconic clothes, and he has to dress as Quentin. And I just think it's quite interesting that there's kind of that guys. But yeah, then I think Leo Quentin has to go. I don't know. I think he has to go do something else. I think, what is this? Yeah, he has to something to do with sand, and then Jimmy also has to take over Project for a day. And for some reason, he decides to dress exactly like Quentin.
Yeah, I do Sorry, I was going to say just before that, there's a conversation with I forget his name, the head of the
Perry White. Fred
man.
Perry is
the brand. Yes, of course.
Right. But they kind of talk about Jimmy Olsen as if he's recently reached this sort of celebrity kind of status for being probably just for doing these wacky things, cool adventures.
He's obviously got the Superman watch where you can call Superman.
Oh, this is a cool watch. This watch comes up a lot, and I think it's really cute.
Yeah, because I think that was his whole thing early on. He would press his watch, call Superman when he's in danger. Then Jack Kirby takes over, and he's just not using his watch, and Superman's flying in what are you doing, Jimmy? And he's in a cloning facility, or he's doing something crazy, and Superman's a normal one. He's like, Jimmy, I'm just checking in on you. You haven't pressed that watch in a while. What are you up to? This is wild.
That's cool. That's fun. And he's getting a tour of... There's a lot of tours in this comic, which I guess makes sense. He's getting a tour of the Project facility. There's a Doomsday door, which will come into fruition later.
I think it's actually another good reason why it's a good beginner comic. I think getting tours of different parts of this, the Superman corner of the DC universe. Even if the Doomsday room never comes up again, it's kind of just quite interesting.
Do we get much about these green people? I think they're
Quentin's helpers or whatever, right?
I think I read in the notes they're meant to be genetically modified and stuff to be
right.
But Grant specifically says they're meant to be non-lethal kind of warriors. They
are also supposed to look a bit like when Lex Luthor gets people in these robot suits to fight Superman and stuff.
Oh, right.
Because there's
just colours swapped.
There's the two warrior ones, but then there's also two scientist ones that are green, and I think they look really cool. I think we see one of them pretty early in issue 1, but they've got cool hairstyles.
Yeah, and Jimmy's getting this tour. I think there is there's just some issue with the construction, and I think they're trying to and then Black Kryptonite is pulled out, and Superman has to save Jimmy Olsen from falling into this vat, and Black Kryptonite apparently makes Superman evil, or it makes he's clearly immune to green kryptonite and probably most other forms of kryptonite, but Black Kryptonite still has an effect on him, which is quite interesting. Yeah.
In one of in an old issue of Superman, there was a red kryptonite that turned him into, I think it was Super Ant-Man, and he has big ant antennas, and he looks kind of funny and awesome.
Is Black Kryptonite new?
It's set up here as if it was new, and if it's his first time seeing Black Kryptonite, and it's probably been used in another context at another point, but we're at least as a reader pretending it's a new concept.
I'm
sure they've done that at some point there.
I get you.
Sorry.
Jimmy keeps referencing that he's been cursed, which is quite funny.
yeah, I think that's. And that's the reason for all his bad luck and stuff.
Yeah. So Superman's turning evil because of the black kryptonite. It's also, as it goes on, it's turning him dumber. It's kind of, as we see later, he's kind of turning Bizarro, it seems like.
Interesting.
Yes, yeah.
Okay, that's cool.
So I don't know if this has emerged from Bizarro World before their arrival in the next issue.
Because we know Project were messing with Bizarros and stuff as well, so...
Yeah, and then Jimmy Olsen turning himself into Doomsday to beat up Superman. Just like
destroy
him.
this guy. Yeah, exactly.
Slammed his head into the...
What's everyone's thoughts on this Jimmy Olsen Doomsday design?
I don't like looking at it that much. It's quite ugly, but
I think it's just very similar to the classic Doomsday design, which isn't that great either.
Well, I know I like the classic the classic one. It's fun because it's just like ultra spiky and everything.
Yeah,
but when you try and merge it with like a regular guy, it looks a bit.
Maybe they've just made his eyes and ears and facial features more prominent, which looks funny.
But it feels very classic. Like
I agree.
Someone turning into a half like Jimmy turning into a half monster feels very classic and.
Yeah.
And you can see bits of his ginger hair still.
Yeah, I think it's cute. Yeah. But no, I think basically Jimmy beats up Superman and then takes him to rehabilitation.
Yeah, they find Jimmy with Superman, who's just collapsed and unconscious now, and he gets 2 free tickets to Frankenstein on Ice, which later on he gifts to
Lucy.
Yeah.
I find them really funny together.
Yeah. I think they're very cute, yeah.
I like him finding out that he had basically unlimited budget as head of project, so he's carved I Love Lucy onto the moon.
Onto the moon.
I think
there's
people are quite reckless with the moon.
Yeah, I was going to say.
Comic.
Can we leave the moon alone?
Yeah.
If we're going to go on to this next episode, I really like this cover. I know this is my favourite, but it's just one of my favourite covers for some reason. I don't know why. It's basically like Lex Luthor protecting Clark Kent in prison while a bunch of prisoners are holding like weapons to them.
I think there's a great use of perspective here as well, where we just see these like hands with like massive weapons and then kind of quite a timid. Actually, Lex looks quite scared in this. But covering him even more scared Clark.
If we're gonna go into this issue, I think what Grant said about Lex in their notes is that like so many other writers who've wrote like origin stories or stuff from the perspective of Lex have bought into Lex's thing that Lex is the smartest person ever, and Grant is like, no, he thinks he's the smartest person ever. He's not actually that smart. But Grant also talks a lot about like we all have a bit of Lex in us. Like a good Superman story should have you rooting for Lex sometimes a little bit because you get it a little bit.
I do. During this comic, I during the scene when he's like explaining to Clark kind of part of his insecurity, I understand because like he's clearly. I mean, he clearly works hard, right? He's clearly very talented, and I guess he's annoyed that there's someone who seems to just everything seems to come quite naturally to him. But I guess it's also somewhat of a contradictory ideology. Because obviously he like didn't work to be the smartest person or to be one of the smartest people in the world or whatever, right? A large part of that will be natural talent, but he's ignoring that entirely. Yeah, but I really like the beginning of this story. So I guess this is a good time to bring this up. I read my copies digitally, which for some reason they were out of order. I think I may have misclicked something, whatever, right? So they were out of order, right? Yeah. And as such, this was the final. This like big spread of Lex Luthor being compared to Hitler was the final thing I read in the first section, and then it skipped right to like the final third, which was really confusing, and it put all the Bizarro stuff at the end. Yeah. So I really just thought that the story was really confusing and like artsy or whatever. But honestly, like it kind of gave me this strange appreciation for this really big spread where Lex Luthor's on this podium and he's being compared to a bunch of like quite uncontroversially bad people.
Yeah.
What next to this like very like villainous like spread of his eyebrow.
I think that might just be for like trade for this.
Yeah,
trade,
no, that's
like-
true. That's true. This is just for that trade. But yeah,
But it's cool still. Like it does add something.
yeah.
Yeah, they do say that Lex is comparing himself to all these villainous figures. I don't. That just seems a bit like out of my understanding of that character. I kind of thought that Lex believes in him being quite a good person that's for the people and helping them and stuff. So I didn't love that necessarily, but
I also-
maybe I'm just
yeah.
not understanding quite
Yeah.
what Grant was going for there.
But yeah.
In summary, this whole issue is Lex in prison after being given the death sentence. Clark goes in to report, ask him questions in his, is it 3 days he's got left? Something like that.
Yeah.
Parasite grows big, tries to escape from prison.
Because I think Parasite gets power from local sources or whatever, right?
Yeah.
So Lex and Clark team up, and Lex hands himself back in at the end.
Yeah.
Is there much to talk about there? I mean,
Lex Luthor's got quite a Goodfellas setup in prison.
Yeah.
He's got a quite sweet setup in prison.
at the end we get introduced to what's her name?
Nasty as I think
I think it's like Nostalgia also. Yeah, Nostalgia.
Yeah. She's cool.
She's funny.
Yeah, she's
I
funny.
think when we first meet her, we assume it's like kind of like Lex's young girlfriend or something.
Yeah, but it's actually his niece. Which is
We learn later on it's his niece, which I found really funny.
Which I think makes so much sense.
Yeah.
Because I think Lex Luthor is such uncle energy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't remember this. There's a is it a baboon?
Yes.
Dressed as
So
Superman?
basically,
I can't remember what that was all
for
about.
some reason, Lex Luthor wants to just remove any sort of credibility to Clark's story. So he just makes the final bit ridiculous.
Right,
He
okay.
shakes a monkey that looks like Superman. He has his edgy niece take him down a river of Styx to leave the prison, and I think it's all just meant to add a layer of ridiculousness.
I was gonna say I liked Lex's the way Lex talks in this issue. He Clark's using shorthand and Lex really looks down on that. And then I wrote down that it reminds me of interactions with old men when they're just you talk about something you're doing and it's that's I don't know, the way in which he is dismissive of things felt very real to me.
Okay, that's fair. My thought was that it's a code. I thought not that his handwriting's bad, but he just doesn't want people to know his shorthand.
Oh.
Yeah. But yeah, it could be that equally. But yeah, I see what you're saying. I think Lex in this is the perfect balance of kind of understandable, but also just very detestable.
Yeah, and at the end, Clark is saying you can be a good person, and Lex is I'm just happy to get my death sentence because I killed Superman, and what else could I want?
I also like the Superman and Clark being physically carrying themselves differently.
Yeah.
Clark takes off his glasses here, and no one
Yeah.
notices it's Superman.
Yeah.
I like this. This is there's multiple explanations for why people don't know. I think this is my favorite version of it.
Fair. I see what you're saying. I see what you're
The
saying.
hair's drawn differently, his posture, his mannerisms. I think,
For some reason, this I want to talk about.
sorry.
No.
You go.
I don't want to talk about other comic books too much. For some reason, this whole dynamic reminded me a little bit of Superior Spider-Man. Not to spoil other comics, but obviously in that there is also a similar dynamic with Doctor Octopus.
People know the premise of
Okay, that's
Superior
fine.
Spider-Man.
So Superior Spider-Man, Doctor Octopus steals Spider-Man's body, whatever, right? And basically, Spider-Man is going to die. And I think there's a similar thing there. I think that there's a similar tragedy in the whole thing that even if a supervillain can take down a superhero with them, because the worst thing that a supervillain can do is take away the good that the superhero can do in a way. But yeah, I think it really really hammers home just how unlikable Lex is. Even if you can kind of relate to some of his insecurity, he's just not really liked.
There's a funny bit where Lex points out that he has Superman's eyebrows and says, "Did you know that a lot of men who idolize Superman subconsciously trim their eyebrows to look like Superman?" I thought that was funny. Funny way of showing that people not connected.
Doesn't
Superman
Lex
and Clark.
also have to draw on his eyebrows near the end of this, which I think is funny.
He brags about killing Superman.
Yeah.
Which is,
Very very Lex Luthor. Yes. Yeah.
Would you like to
I think
Move
we
on.
can move
Yeah.
on, yeah.
Well, actually, this final spread of the River Styx, I think, is really cool. I think this is like not Superman at his lowest, but at one of his lowest. Because I think, like we said, like near the beginning, like one of Superman's like biggest goals is to try and redeem Lex Luthor. And in this moment, I think maybe he feels like the most hopeless with that sort of thing. Like he's really low, he's sad, his glasses are broken, he's looking really dejected. Well, going down the River Styx, obviously the River Styx has, you know, that's where the people go to die. That's where the dead people go. But yeah, I just think it's quite a moving final spread.
Yeah. Okay, next issue is
Oh, this is a good one.
It's my favorite. This is my
I think it's
favorite
called.
one, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You said the other one. You said issue 3 was your favorite before.
No. That's one of my favorite ones. This is my favorite one.
They can all be your favorite.
They're not all my favorite. This is my favorite one.
Yeah, and this is the flashback issue, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The summary, basically, this is a flashback of around the time Superman, or Clark, I guess, fully was thinking of moving from Smallville to the big city, right? And tragically, he gets into a fight, I guess, in his own young hubris, with the Chronovore, and the Chronovore misses the opportunity for like Superman to save his dad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I liked seeing Smallville Superman with all his Smallville friends.
Yeah.
I like that they know, they figure it out. They know who he is, which no one in Metropolis does, but they do because
they're OGs. They know that they know.
it's also because it's kind of, this is before he's really built like the Clark Kent persona.
Yeah,
it's still kind of just him not being Superman. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah,
it might be like the realist version of him in Smallville.
I get what you're saying. I actually really like this bit here, where like Clark Kent is like kind of like playing with Superman, and Superman says, "Even I'm not immune to embarrassment, Pa." And for some reason, that really got me because it makes a lot, because like a lot of people talk about the Superman character being like all powerful, and like he's like physically speaking, we could say that he is incredibly powerful, almost all powerful, but like emotionally and psychologically, he is kind of like very similar to us. He's just like a normal guy, and I think it's very interesting that's the way that the character is depicted. And I think that in this story, you know, his physical like limitations are no longer there, but all his like emotional limitations are really tested. I think that's really cool.
Crypto's in this issue.
Yeah, the goat.
Yeah.
Well, the dog. just for clarification.
But yeah, I think it's just really cute to see
Play
Clark
fetch,
Kent.
but Superman throws a tree. Crypto catches it.
No.
So a big plot point of this issue is that the bandaged Superman of, what's his name?
AD
The unknown
4000.
Superman.
Yeah.
The unknown Superman.
4,500 AD.
Yeah. That's actually Superman from the future. He wants to go.
It's
back
our
and visit
Superman.
Our Superman.
Yeah.
In the future.
In the future, he wants to go back and see Clark Kent get gobbled up by the Chronovore.
He wants some last words with Clark Kent.
Exactly.
But he comes along with like the Superman squad.
Yeah.
So one of them
his
is
ancestors, basically.
well,
No, his
successors.
progeny?
Maybe.
Like, yeah.
So there's the unknown Superman. There's
Yeah, so I think I want to talk about this
He's
guy.
based on.
Mr. Mxyzptlk.
Right.
Yeah.
Because I wasn't sure if that was one of his ancestors and like Superman had kids with.
It's like he
Mxyzptlk.
had kids with another like fifth dimension
Yeah,
entity in that vein.
He's on a cloud. That's pretty cool.
Yeah. Apparently, there's a Superman from AD 85 to 50. Apparently he was first introduced or like spoken of in a different Grant Morrison comic. I read that in the notes. I'm gonna
Really cool.
look that up because there's a bunch of stuff about the Superman squad in here. Sorry guys.
That's not a problem. But yeah. No, I think in this one, I would have loved to talk about, but I think the name is written in such a way where it's impossible to say properly.
Yeah. Well, Mr. Mxyzptlk has like that's how it's apparently pronounced.
Yeah.
But I don't even know how to
Start.
He's got 2 names as well. I don't even know how to say
5D Superman is what it says in the notes. I think
But-
it's much easier.
So apparently the Superman squad was first mentioned in DC 1 Million, the crossover series I devised in 1998.
Right.
Grant Morrison said.
Yeah.
So that the Superman
Cal Kent.
Cal Kent Superman is Superman 1 Million. And the idea, his logo, it's just like 3 lines, which is meant to be the Superman logo, basically super simplified over time. There's obviously the unknown Superman.
With a question mark, yeah.
And then towards the end, we see 3 other Supermen.
Yes.
Yes.
Gold Superman and 2 other Supermen.
So there's Gold Superman. So to the right of Gold Superman, there's Superman. Apparently, to the right of Superman is meant to be Superman 2.
Oh, I see.
But that's not said. And then to the left is Super Lass, which doesn't mean much in canon, but she's meant to be a reference to like Legion of Superheroes because they would have a lot of lads and lasses as characters.
Yeah.
And I think it's ambiguous as to whether Gold Superman is Clark.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it is that.
but-
It is after being in the sun.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But his insignia looks like an S, but it also looks like 2.
Kind of like yin and yang. Like a
Yeah,
little
but
bit.
it also looks like 2 quotation marks.
Yeah, I see that.
So
Yeah, that's interesting.
that's interesting. Yeah.
But yeah, no. This episode I think is like it's very central. It's very the Chronivore is introduced. The Chronivore is some sort of like time traveling entity that eats time or something, right? And Cal Kent and the Unknown Superman and the 5D Superman all tell like flashback Superman, don't fight the Chronivore, go spend time with your dad, right?
Yeah.
But in his hubris and his young hubris, he doesn't listen to them, and the Chronivore is able to like devour the 3 minutes that Superman could have used to save Parker.
Which, for reference, the Chronivore is a big red ball with like 10 mouths and bird claws.
Yeah. It's very tragic. It's obviously one of like the most tragic parts of the Superman character. He can save everyone except the people that are closest to him. It's
Yeah.
But
I like maybe this being set in the past. I think it's just, I think losing someone like Parken, I don't think it should be part of his origin, but also, that not being able to stop time is part of his human side, and I think I like that happening at some point in his life, and obviously this is set later on, so
I know what you're saying.
I believe, I don't want to go into this because I don't know the details, but part of Grant Morrison's inspiration for this character and for writing this story and the emotional kind of was maybe to do with losing their dad. So this issue obviously reflects that.
Yeah.
It's obvious also like it weaves into the whole story a flashback issue. This being one of the definitive Superman stories, you need a little bit of Smallville.
Yeah.
So weaving in a flashback issue into this bigger story is quite smart.
Yeah. Unknown Superman is revealed at the end of this episode to be our Superman from present day who's dying, going back in time with Superman Squad.
Yeah.
and
And then there's the funeral, and it's Clark speaks beautifully about how the morals that his dad instilled in him. Like we talked about before, is about what you do, not what you say.
and we've talked about the Golden Superman, so that might be it for this issue.
Yep.
We've got one final shot of him by Jonathan Kent's grave with the flower gifted by Golden Superman.
Yeah, by
I've just
Golden
noticed.
Superman.
I didn't even.
I think it's
pick
meant to be
up
like
on
an indestructible flower or something, meant to represent. And then we have the Bizarro story. I think it's probably my favorite arc. I've thrown around that word a lot, right? I've thrown around that word a lot. I really like the whole Bizarro stuff.
that. And this would be like 3 issues, right? Or 2?
2, I believe.
Yeah, too.
And it sort of starts out like a zombie apocalypse story with the
Yeah.
Bizarros like spreading,
Yeah.
stealing people's
Like
kind
body? Yeah, I don't know.
not taking over their bodies, but kind of
Making them
cloning themselves to look like.
At the start, he we see him hanging out with the Sun Eater, saying goodbye. Before he kind of he flies away and then just gets attacked by some Bizarros.
Yeah. And he gets I really like this double page spread because he gets kind of pushed into Bizarro world or whatever, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's really cool.
which is a giant cube-shaped
Looks like Minecraft.
Yeah, Minecraft.
Yeah. Maybe Bizarro Steve. So, we won't talk about fan theories, but it could be true. But yeah. It's like a zombie apocalypse. All the Bizarros come down and start spreading and that sort of thing.
But they're attacking the people at the Daily Planet.
Yeah, they're on like a staff do.
Yeah.
It's nice to see more of them. I really like the Daily Planet.
The funniest thing that's revealed is that Lombard, who's the guy with the mustache, is immune because he takes Viagra.
Yeah. which I think is the gag that I was like, I don't really understand how that makes sense, but I just thought it was very funny.
You wanted to talk about McDonald's, right?
Well, I'm thinking that we should get a sponsor. And, I think as a first sponsor...
I think McDonald's is quite...
Not McDonald's, no, we should get... What's it called? Look de yeah, I think it would work. I think it would be a good sponsor. Basically, I think it's like everything in this episode is meant to be backwards. Like
the
whole
Santa,
daily,
I think,
but it's not
kids
because that isn't McDonald's backwards. Because
it's not. Yeah,
but like I noticed,
right.
The logic of Bizarro. It's not even a true logic where it's like the opposite.
Yeah,
it's kind of opposite, but then also just like messed with.
Yeah,
that's not even McDonald's backwards. It's like
exactly.
Yeah, like how later on we've got, Bizarro maybe the opposite of Superman, and then Zibaro the opposite of Bizarro.
Yeah. But yeah, basically, like Superman's on the Bizarro, and then Bizarro shows up,
and Bizarro speaks with the same lettering as Superman when he was like kryptonited.
Interesting.
He has a fight with Bizarro. The main focus of the fight is him trying to keep a child safe while he's getting like fire blasted at him by Bizarro.
Yeah,
which he does.
I really like
this.
Fine. I like this panel here, this one with perspective, where we kind of have like Superman in the mid-ground and there's this electricity in the foreground. I don't know if the implication is that Superman can like throw lightning now, but I think that's really cool.
Yeah.
I just think that's really cool.
Well, yeah, we learn he's got
new powers.
He got like supercharged, so he's got cancer, but he's also got new powers.
Yeah. Right, we've got is Jimmy Olsen sniping Bizarro?
That's not Jimmy, is it?
Oh no,
that's Quintum.
Yeah,
Quintum.
But
I'm pretty sure this
back
is
to him being in that outfit.
Yeah, so I think that Jimmy like calls Quinton saying what's going on, and Quinton seems preoccupied with fighting Bizarros, and I think he just explains like the whole situation that they need to get out. Yeah, I think Superman travel. Yeah, I think he leaves Earth, and I think he
he flies to Bizarro planet and hits it with like such an impact that it's like
it cuts a hole through it, right?
I think it's just like I don't quite get the idea, but it's now shrinking to underworld.
I think what it is that like the Bizarros are like vampires, where in the sun they like stop or whatever. So he has to like make, but it's like the middle of the night in the winter, right? So he has to like punch a hole through the planet to get some sun. But yeah,
right.
Lois says, "What happened to Superman?" Which just reminds me of What Happened to the Man of Tomorrow, which I haven't read, but that's like a very famous Superman story.
Yeah.
Which kind of, as I understand that story, is about like after Superman I don't know if he's died, but he's disappeared or something.
Yeah.
And I feel like this poses maybe similar questions. This whole story. To that.
Yeah, I believe it's the story where he's got something attached to him that's making him. He like thinks he's back on Krypton and he's having this
right. But it's also like right before Crisis, so it's like kind of a thing of like we know that this Superman might be over in it.
Yeah.
After that,
did they adapt that for the Justice League TV show?
They did, yeah. I think apparently that's the only adaptation Alan Moore's approved of.
Okay. Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay. That's kind of cool.
Yeah, that is cool.
I like seeing Superman and Bizarro just kind of chatting.
Yeah. Superman can't use his planets because the Bizarro world is like the light from the sun is redshifting because it's shrinking. So
it needs like
the light's becoming more and more red as it shrinks faster.
Which I think like drains his powers more and more as it shifts more and more.
And then we're introduced to Zibaro,
which is my favorite character.
Yeah,
this is my Zibaro makes me so sad. He makes me so sad.
Yeah.
So we've got this shot of him standing on some like wacky house made by Bizarro people.
Yeah,
I think he's looking quite sad.
I think we can go straight into the next issue.
I think
from
we
there.
definitely can.
Yeah.
I do like though that the is Earth from Bizarro World looking like a cube, or is that?
I think that's
something-
their sun.
That's the
I think
sun?
their sun is like a
Right,
big red
okay.
cube. Yeah.
Anyway,
And you've got
But it's dark anyway
yeah, it's weird
because it's Bizarro, I guess.
Yeah, exactly.
the front cover of the next issue is really funny because it spoils the ending where
Yeah.
he's strapped to a rocket, looking scared, while one of the Bizarro people is holding up instructions on how to make a rocket.
This one especially feels very old school, just like
Yeah.
the perspective of it. It's like
I love this issue. I think it's a highlight for me.
Agreed. Yeah. I
So-
think in this one, Bizarro does this like kind of large exposition dump of like the whole Bizarro land. He introduces LaRoge, who I think is Jor-El, who is Superman's dad, who's a leader of the Bizarro people. But he also explains that he is Zabaro, which is like the Bizarro version of Bizarro.
yeah.
And it's quite sad because he has full mental faculties. Like he is wrong in such a way where he is similar to us,
Yeah.
and he like I don't know, he
Yeah,
struggles with loneliness.
Talks later on about how he's the only one that can admire a beautiful sunset. Actually, no, that's at the start here, and then they imitate him and say, "Ha ha ha, Zabaro, I'm king of cool." Two impressions.
I really as a kid, the idea of opposites like really confused me, because if you opposite a full sentence, then it doesn't mean the opposite,
Yeah,
and I feel like
the opposite every word.
Yeah.
so I feel like Zabaro is almost that as a character.
I know what
where
you're saying.
if Bizarro is the opposite, but then if you take the opposite to extreme, it becomes the same again,
I
kind
know
of.
what you're saying.
So yeah,
But yeah, Bizarro is just really sad. And basically, the whole purpose of this second issue is just like Superman just trying to get off Bizarro planet.
but I also think that Zabaro kind of represents like a part of Superman where he knows that he is better than people and like smarter than people, and maybe does have a bit of that feeling of because he's so much better than everyone.
Yeah,
He
that's true.
maybe feels alone in that.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
ultimately, Superman is better than Zabaro because he doesn't
Think that way.
he doesn't actually think that way.
That's true. I find it very tragic. Not to skip to the end, but obviously, like, Zabaro wants to get off this planet where he is incredibly lonely, and Superman says that he will find a way to get him off, but obviously he can't do that feasibly, at least not in this life, right? Yeah. I think it's quite sad.
So yeah, LaRoge is like the king of Bizarro Planet.
Yeah.
LaRoge just walking around holding these scrolls is really funny.
And he looks like a jester, like a medieval jester. I think that's really funny.
Yeah. Does he wear a crown? Because he's
I
like
don't
meant to be
know.
the king. Yeah.
And Superman just like recognizing Jor-El's voice and LaRoge like stumbling in with his spells.
No, I think one of the reasons why it's so funny is this like reveal, because obviously Superman would love to see his dad again. It's like and here he's like, great sons, a Bizarro Jor-El, and then Zabaro's like LaRoge. Yeah.
And I think every time Superman is getting made fun of by the Bizarro people, I just find that really funny. Like, he'll say something normal and then they're all like laughing at him.
Yeah. I think, and then this next bit is Quentin like realizing that like they're being pulled into the underverse, the Bizarro world, and Superman doesn't have much chance to get out. It's one of those classic the hole is closing, you have to get out at the last minute type.
They basically say, "Oh, Superman's dead. He's not coming back." Well, 6 more issues. But
yeah. And basically, like, Superman and Zabaro like are discussing how he's going to get off this planet, and Zabaro is incredibly dejected, very pessimistic, and saying there's no way to get off. There's no way to ally all of the Bizarro people together. And Superman, very famously, he's like, "I have to try," which I think is really cool.
And he wins them over by talking in backwards speech.
Yeah.
They all boo him, which is a good thing. Of
course.
And then this.
Oh and then they build a rocket essentially together.
But with the help of the Bizarro League,
the Bizarro League,
which I love. I think my favorite bit is, Wonder Woman, instead of being sculpted out of clay as a baby, was turned into clay by a beautiful baby as an adult. Bizarro Batman was killed by his parents. But like that's just to reveal like it's just happened. Like, Bizarro's asking when Bizarro Batman's going to turn up, and they're like, "Nah, he was shot dead by his parents."
Flash is super slow, but Flash says, "and no secret weapon," which I first read that literally.
Oh, right.
But it turns out he does have a secret weapon.
Yeah.
Which is funny. And then Bizarro Green Lantern has a nose ring, Green Lantern ring.
I think that's kind of the only difference if you read everything backwards. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Zabaro finds out that there's only space for one on this rocket ship, but Superman promises to return and help him, but also provides this other perspective that maybe the Bizarro people are evolving and will become more like him, and he can help them and share stories. And
it just, you know, and I guess it speaks to like Superman's empathy that he's like, he doesn't really, I don't know if he really sees them, if Bizarros are that stupid, they kind of just speak a different language that he can learn.
I do find it funny though that the ceremony where they send Superman out of the planet also involves burning the king on a bonfire for like no reason. Like that just, there's no explanation for that. It just
And then Bizarro sings "No Say I'm No See" by Am Night's
They have
Early
to
Dark.
sing the Star Spangled Banner, but Bizarro version.
Yeah,
which I think is funny.
And he wears a crown made of fabric.
Yeah.
Flash comes back with his no secret weapon, which is a match, but then it doesn't work. I think.
So I think because they need fire, Superman upsettingly has to bully Bizarro into like throwing him away or whatever. And then he like, you know, he exits the Underverse.
I also like the detail that Superman mentions the Bizarro people love to build things, and that's just like
cute.
A nice little thing.
Yeah,
you know?
That makes sense.
And they're all saying now on Earth, Superman's dead. He's not coming back, but I think we can assume that he will.
It's interesting how like because then in the next story, it's revealed that he's been away for 2 months. So perhaps it's quite clear that maybe time works differently in Bizarro Planet.
Also, on this final page, Bizarro's doing the Thinker.
He
is. Why is that? What does that mean?
Maybe it shows the fact that he's
more and
he's evolving. That's really cool.
But that like fully is. That is the pose from the statue. Like,
it could also be a mirror of maybe like the Superman from the beginning, who's kind of sat in a similar-ish position, but he's more chill and he's sat in a more like hunched over position, thinking.
And Zabaro's waving him off.
Yeah.
Kind of in this, like he's very tiny on this last page.
He is.
It's kind of quite sad, really, but and it looks like a lot of Bizarro people also set on fire when the rocket launched. So I kind of feel bad.
The next issue has two Kryptonians. What are their names?
Yeah, I had this written.
Do you want to check the back?
Yes, because Grant Morrison actually has explanations for their names. So they are okay. Bar-El and Lilo.
Yeah,
they're meant to be because Okay, let me explain it first. They are Kryptonian explorers that they went to space before Krypton exploded.
Yeah.
So they've come to Earth and they've sort of replaced Superman. But kind of the reveal is that they want to colonize Earth, basically.
Yeah.
And obviously Superman can't have that.
Yeah.
But they've also taken over the Fortress of Solitude because they can lift the key. Grant Morrison says because Clark was a scientist kid.
Yeah.
So he's like a nerd on Krypton.
Yeah.
These are like Kryptonian, like...
cool guys.
Cool guys.
Yeah.
They said,
that makes sense.
They said they're meant to be Scottish Kryptonians.
Oh.
They're like macho, but they're named after like... Bar-El is named after the notorious Glasgow prison at Barlinnie.
That's cool.
And Lilo is just named after a piece of pool furniture. But but there's a bit where Bar-El calls Superman like a wee man or something.
Yeah, no, like a wee scientist son or whatever. And he boots him.
That's exactly what that is.
That's really cool.
But this issue is very invincible.
Yeah, I did think that.
Yeah.
I do kind of like that, like, everyone, like, there's obviously been a time jump since the last issue, and everyone's talking about, like, the replacements. Like, they've obviously established themselves, and there's a bit happened off page that we don't know about.
I was really confused by this opening. I thought that they were like, I thought it was like Pompeii. Like, I thought they'd gone back in time. Pompeii, or they were like, But I think they're just like, erupting a volcano.
Or if they made floodgates for it.
I'm not entirely
don't
sure.
quite understand what they're doing.
Yeah, but
they're doing something. I don't think they're like evil, but they're like kind of trying to sculpt Earth into Krypton.
Yeah.
I think,
which is a bad thing, but they're not like gonna just kill everyone for no reason. Right?
they're you get the vibe that they are like really in love with each other, and Grant talks about in the notes like sort of wanting to imply that they've been on like so many crazy space adventures before coming down to before we see them, and we can imagine this whole epic love story.
It's a bit like, though, if you like, you know, like we were talking about Golden Age characters coming back earlier. If you like read an issue of Superman where it's some character you haven't seen, you can kind of, it's the same sort of vibe where you're like, oh, I can kind of tell what sort of adventures they've been on and that sort of thing.
I think it's very much like if we like embracing what comics are nowadays, where you read a comic and you don't know everything in the past. Like Grant Morrison does that a lot, where they'll introduce new characters and you still don't know everything, and you have to pick it up in the same way you'd pick up something from a comic that did have other comic backstory.
Basically Superman shows up. He's just come back from Bizarro Planet. He's like, what are you guys doing? And they basically say, like, we've taken over your fortress, we've taken over Metropolis, we've made Metropolis into a kind of like a semi-Kryptonian city with like the spires. And then he throws him into the sun. The sun gets really beat up during this story, like you say.
The moon,
sorry. And the moon gets cracked, and like Bar-Rail has to like use bridges to fix the crack.
I think the action in this issue as well is very invincible too. Like, just the way they're like chucking him into the moon and then picking him up and like throwing him back to Earth.
For clarity, we're talking about Invincible, the comic series, and the cartoon. Because that obviously, in many ways, it's a riff on Superman, but the sort of the race in Invincible that's basically like the Kryptonians also want to colonize Earth.
Do we have anything else to say about these guys?
Lombard's in it again. He's got his hairpiece sets on fire.
There's another bit where Clark falls over.
But the issue is resolved by putting these Kryptonians... Oh, well, first he used the gravity gun on them, and then he puts them in the Phantom Zone.
So I think that they're dying.
They are dying.
They're dying of something.
Through like a kryptonite gas field or
and
something.
And so like it's in a way that like Superman, they're dying. So I think he lets them to control the Phantom Zone.
That reveal was quite abrupt, but I'm fine with that. Like, I didn't need I didn't need to see that happen. I think
I also think if we assume that like space adventurers, like going to the Phantom Zone kind of feels like the logical endpoint of that, you know?
And also it's kind of like, I don't know, they seem quite happy going to the Phantom Zone.
Yeah, exactly. Because I guess they get to be together.
Another big adventure, my love, where you go, I go, we go together, and then, you know, Superman's made them hold hands. So, I think that's quite nice. I mean, they were kind of like horrible people, but, you know, also, they're like a cute couple, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Next issue 10, I believe. This one, on the cover, Superman's got the whole world in his hands. Like the song.
Yeah.
By who?
By God?
By God.
I don't know.
He's got the whole world in his hands. Did you not sing that in like primary school?
No, I don't know. I think God writes them, though.
I don't know.
In the way God writes everything.
Obviously, but I feel like it's not like by God, you know what I mean? So he's not like the... It's not really composed. So in this, it begins with Superman taking, I think, some like children around. I think children suffering from cancer to the pyramids of Giza, and then writing his last will and testament. Yeah, I think.
Oh yeah, he's writing his will. I wrote in my notes that this. I didn't write much about this issue except just that it exemplifies a lot of what's been going on in the whole comic.
Yeah. I think there's the big Kandor is kind of central to this story.
Yeah.
He this is the one where he finally tackles bringing Kandor back to its original size. Just I guess to re-go over what Kandor is. Kandor is like a Kryptonian city that was shrunk by Brainiac to be miniature, and Superman's one of his 12 labors is to bring it back to its original size.
Yeah, we see the Kryptonian flag, which has been redesigned by Grant Morrison. I don't particularly know what the previous one was. I think it was something similar, but it's been redesigned to look like something more scientific because Grant said that the original one felt too nationalist and was out of character for what Krypton
That's cool.
is as a society.
That's interesting. But I think what happens is Superman shrinks Quentin down to go and negotiate, explain Superman's plan to the people of Kandor, and I think I think whilst waiting for Quentin to negotiate, he looks into his Earth Q. He saves some train. He saves Lois Lane from Mecha Man again.
But she only put herself there to be saved by Superman because she wanted to talk to him. Yeah. She says that.
Damn. Mechanic Man, another amazing villain design in this comic. I think it looks really cool.
Like an action figure.
He looks a bit like Action Man,
or like someone from Godzilla, like a robot.
Yeah, what's that? There's a genre. I'm forgetting the name of it.
I forgot. Sorry, was it
Kaiju?
No, that's something in it.
The previous, I think it might have been the previous issue. Quintum's told Lois that Superman's dying.
Yes, so
I don't think we said that.
I think it occurs. I think it might occur off page.
No, I remember. I feel like I remember it happening.
Think, he tells her that he's more vulnerable, and then she's like, "Why?"
Yeah,
and then he's like, "You kind of know he's gonna tell her."
Yeah.
It's revealed that he does.
Yes. But so Superman saves Lois. They have a conversation about how he's dying, and I think then. And so Superman asks, why did you tell Lois that I was dying? And during all this, because obviously previous to this, Superman, I think there is a train that's been stopped by Superman from crashing, and there's a very scared man on that train, seeming quite stressed about the other person on the end of the line. And this is obviously probably the most famous part of this story. There's this girl called Regan, I think, and she's considering committing suicide. She was on the phone to her doctor, and Superman tells her that she's stronger than she knows, and that she should.
It's quite a famous page.
Yeah, it's very famous, very very famous, and arguably necessary. I think Superman isn't just a man who fights zombies, not the sort of thing. Yeah. He's a protector of the weak. I think it's important just to have moments like this. But then we cut to the Kandor negotiation. Obviously, a callback to when Bar-El and Lilo took all the bridges to fix the moon. Superman is almost finished, fixing all the bridges on Earth. This is kind of Superman going down his to-do list, get a lot of stuff done, negotiate with Kandor. At this point, he's also memorizing his genetic pattern so that later he can be cloned for make a Superman 2. And then also it's showing the progression of Earth Q and Superman and Lex's final meeting. But so I think ultimately quite a lot happens in this comic. Kandor gets brought back to its original size, placed on Mars. Lois finally talks to Clark about how he's dying. Lex and Clark have their final meeting, before their showdown at the end, and and Clark memorizes his genetic code, and we see kind of Earth Q's progression.
Yeah.
And then the final panel from Earth Q, like I was saying at the beginning, is their version of Friedrich Nietzsche hunched over writing, quite funnily, but called Also Sprach Zarathustra, which I think is...
That's not the final panel of Earth Q. The final is
Is it?
we see the invention of Superman
Where?
as a comic book character,
You're so right. That's so cool.
which is basically
That's awesome.
Earth Q is created to be
A world.
a world without Superman,
It's like a-
and the idea is they in a world without Superman, aka our world, we still invent Superman.
That's really cool. Damn. Okay, never mind. Yeah, that's really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then also, and then because the citizens of Kandor can, because I guess they're scientists, they can cure most diseases. What he does is he leaves some miniature and he goes back to the children with cancer, and he allows them to cure their cancer, which is really cool. Which I think is one of his 12 labors, actually. Yeah. And the final thing in his last will and testament that he leaves to Clark Kent, the headline of the century, Superman dead.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that is
Episode 10?
that's episode 10, and that's the cover of issue 11 as well. We see Clark and the headline Superman dead.
Yeah.
So, should we go right into
A quick summary of episode 11. Lex on the electric chair, about to be killed. He actually survived. I think he's taken some super serum. This is kind of like the last two are kind of like a two-part, kind of a final showdown between Superman and Lex before Superman has to die. Will die. There's Tyrant's son who's going to swallow the sun. The final showing of the Sun Eater, who tragically passes, and Lex has his own sort of Superman persona, which I think looks really cool. He's got this long flowy cape.
He looks like Grant Morrison.
he does a bit, actually,
page especially.
Yeah, he does. And at the end of these two issues, as we know, Superman will die. But yeah, let's get into it.
Yeah. Okay, that's a good idea. We'll do like these two issues kind of as one. Okay.
Yeah, so basically they try to fry Lex Luthor on the electric chair, but he does his villain laugh or whatever, and he reveals the fact that he can't die because he's got a super strength because he's taken the super serum. He breaks out of prison. It's showing Superman like cleaning the Sun Eater's like cage after Sun Eater's left, kind of leaving everything to his robots.
I we see Zabaro's poetry is going to be in super laminate.
Yeah.
Which is cute.
It is very important.
Again, Superman mentions Batman.
Yeah,
as like one of his besties.
Obviously.
I love the loriness around like Superman just being a collector, collecting bits of Earth and Kryptonian culture and building this archive. I think.
Yeah, I think that's cool.
That's fun, and that's not something that's touched on much. The Fortress, and so, at least in what I've read,
we see Nostalgia again, and she's while Lex has been in prison, she's just been like living in his hideout with all his like old suits and stuff.
And he charges her with like, going and causing some havoc.
And this is where it's revealed that Nostalgia is Lex's niece.
Yeah.
Which is quite funny.
Yeah, it's cute. And then Superman has this like little redesign because obviously it's revealed that the Tyrant's son is going to try and kill the sun, right? Try to devour the sun. Superman has this sort of like Metro Man look.
Yeah. I believe.
It's white suit, white cape, and then like a
sun
redesigned
with an
S. Yeah, it looks like a sun.
I didn't really think about that being a sun, but like that's another example of the logo being messed with. It doesn't have to be the same all the time.
An all-star.
All-star? Like all-star,
of course.
Superman?
But in Grant Morrison's pitch for Superman Now, which they were going to do in like 99, they had a specific design for Superman's logo that was a little bit new. That didn't end up being used or anything. But I just think that's interesting that they've always had an interest in messing with Superman's logo.
Yeah, that is cool. Yeah, this is Superman's last fly away from the Fortress of Solitude. He locks it up forever. He says he's signing out, and he goes in a suicide charge against the Tyrant Sun with all his robots.
Yeah.
He goes. I'm pretty sure, like, a lot of his robots die almost immediately when fighting the Tyrant Sun. The Tyrant Sun obviously gloats, as any villain will do, and then the Sun Eater shows up. Superman attempts to have the Sun Eater devour the sun, but the Tyrant Sun kills Sun Eater, which, this is like the kick the dog moment. Like, this is it's too far now. The Sun Eater was, a fan favorite and has now been killed, and Superman's in a bit of a rage. And then here, I love Sun Eater. I think this is really sad. I think, maybe even more sad than Park Kent. Yeah, I mean, obviously you have Crypto, but I don't know. I think Sun Eater, is a character that we've had all the way from the beginning. I think it's quite interesting to have Clark have this moment of rage near the end of his days. But obviously, he doesn't lose it, but he does kind of, he is angry that his pet has died.
Yeah.
Nasty Nastanthia, she's driving around in this kind of alien tank, kind of causing. I think what Clark, after defeating the Tyrant Sun, he comes back. He has to get back into character. He falls asleep. I think he's meant to publish the story, but he falls asleep at his laptop.
I think that's
Because he staged that.
Yeah.
To be clumsy Clark Kent.
Yeah. It's good.
I think it's so. Obviously, that doesn't end up being quite true, but it's so interesting. I think it's interesting that you plan to die as Clark Kent. It's not a grand.
Yeah.
It ends up being more like that, but in his plan, it's not a grand.
So is he meant to stage his death against the Tyrant Sun? He dies for the Tyrant Sun.
Yeah,
that makes sense. Yeah. That's quite cool. Yeah. But obviously, Lex has different plans, and then we enter the final issue, where Lex is in this. Yeah, like I was saying before, this really cool design, kind of purple jumpsuit, green boots, green coat.
I will say, because I don't know how much Grant Morrison has a hand in these designs, but in New X-Men, Magneto gets a redesign, and it's a similar vibe where it's turned into kind of regular clothes and a big coat. So I think that's interesting.
That's cool.
That's a vibe that Grant Morrison sees. I guess Frank Whiteley worked on New X-Men as well. But, yeah.
So I think what happens is that Lex bursts in the window and knocks out Clark, and I think this is meant to be a vision wherein he sees his father for the last time.
He's dying.
And what I've read is that he has the choice to give up and stay with his father in this vision, in a sense, but he chooses to fight for humanity for one last time.
Well, he's got a last bit of consciousness, a last bit of strength that he only has because he got cancer, kind of because he was supercharged.
Yeah.
So he's able to channel that into kind of coming back to life for a little bit.
Yeah. There's this obviously Clark will wake up, but before Lex has this, he kind of gloats to the members of the Daily Planet as he bursts in, and I really like this face that Frank Whiteley has drawn. It's just a very classic sneer.
Snarl,
This snarl is really, really good, but it just kind of shows how repulsive Lex is as a character. It's really cool, but obviously Clark, he says no to this sort of paradise with his dad in this vision, and he chooses to wake up and fight Lex one last time. In an attempt to redeem Lex one more time.
There's one bit. Oh no. There's a bit in here where I thought, because Lex looks a bit like Grant, and then there's a bit where Lex says, "I should be writing these." And I was like, so I don't know how on purpose that is, but
that's cute.
I thought that was funny.
Yeah. No, I think I like the idea that he, who is it? I think it's Lois. He says that he'd keep Lois alive as part of his propaganda department, which I think is very villainous. I think it's very classic. Yeah. But then Clark shoots Lex with his gravity gun, takes him plummeting to Earth, and they essentially duke it out. But whilst they do fight, and Lex kind of demolishes Clark for a lot of it, what happens is Lex's powers run out, and Lex kind of sees the world in the way that Superman sees the world, and it's something that he's not able to really let go of, and he's I don't know. He bursts into tears.
It breaks him, really.
It breaks him. Yeah. Being able to see the beauty in the way that Superman sees the beauty, and then quite sad. Like Lex said, I could have saved the world if it weren't for you. Like we were saying before, how Lex views Clark in the way of his sort of self-realization, and Clark saying, if you wanted to save the world, you would have done it a long time ago.
Yeah.
It's he's done all he can to try and redeem Lex Luthor, and I think he's done all he can, basically. And then Lex
Superman's kind of fading away.
Yeah, exactly. He
gets this quite grand exit.
Yeah,
where he flies into the sun.
I think the sun's dying. I think he has to make a new heart for the sun because of the Tyrant Sun. He flies into the sun. It's very classic, final podium shot.
Yeah.
They're all sat in the park, and Lois says something when he comes back, he knows where to find me.
Yeah.
And there's this beautiful shot of sort of this sun god.
It's very mythic,
very, very mythic.
Yeah. It looks like an ancient carving or something.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's him it looks like he's pulling a lever, a crank
exactly.
inside the sun.
Yeah. And then it's just kind of a final little epilogue, few panels.
Post-credits scene.
Basically post-credits. Quentin saying that, we would have to worry about Superman being gone because we've got Project 2, Superman 2.
Yeah, well, it's the Superman logo, but instead of an S, it's a 2.
It's a 2, yeah, it's Project.
Which, again, playing with the logo.
Yeah.
And I think that when I first read it, I found that, I don't know, I wasn't that... that ending didn't, super hit for me. But then as I was going through the notes and going back through it, I was like, oh, no, we see all these future Supermen, and it's only because of this. And it makes... That made it so much more satisfying for me.
I get what you're saying.
Kind of realising that.
And maybe he's Golden Superman, maybe he's not.
Maybe.
Yeah.
What are everyone's thoughts? Overall, what are your opinions on on All Star?
It's pretty cool.
I think it's pretty great. Yeah.
No, I liked it. I like it. But for some reason, I was expecting it to be grander. I think I was expecting every single he talks to the Justice League. He's like, this is what you need to do after I'm gone. All that sort of thing. But it's a lot more episodic. It's a lot more he's dying and he's just trying to clean up shop. He's trying to talk to his friends, all that sort of thing.
15 years before this, there had been the death of Superman, the comic.
Yeah.
Which is interesting. I haven't read that. I don't know how much.
Yeah. I think the Earth Q stuff is really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, about the inevitability.
More recently, Grant Morrison did Superman and the Authority, which unfortunately is a tie-in. It's 4 issues that connect to a larger Superman story, but it does have some of that Superman in his older age building a new Justice League, building a... It's called The Authority because it's kind of linked to the team, The Authority. It's not sounds a bit scary Superman.
Yeah, it does.
It's not. Yeah.
I'm interested in, because Grant Morrison wrote in New 52 the Action comic series, which was a flashback to... It was Superman... It's Superboy, basically, where he's a younger Superman kind of origin stories. And I'd be interested to read that because it's technically in a different universe. It's New 52. And this wasn't canon anyway. But I do think whenever a writer has written multiple stories on a character, there tends to be linked by their conception of who this character is. Because New 52 is shaky anyway.
Yeah. I get
but reading that in a vacuum... After reading this, I'd be really interested to see it building a version of who Grant Morrison's Superman is.
I think All-Star Superman, I think this is I would definitely recommend this if someone's I want to read Superman, because a lot of very famous comics, quintessential comics, I use Dark Knight Returns as an example, right? I don't think I'd recommend that as a first reading. I mean, it's fun, it's really cool or whatever, but it gives you, it's meant to be a deconstruction of a character that you maybe isn't properly constructed to you as a reader just yet. But also Superman, I do think, is very quintessential. It hits all those really important points really well.
How many labels out of 12 are you giving it?
I'd give it... I'd give it... Let me think. I'd give it 8 labels out of 12.
Okay.
I'd give it 8 labels out of 12, yeah.
What other... Superman stories have you guys read that you would like pair with this or recommend along with this? Or
I remember I read For All Seasons ages ago. Now I don't remember what happened, but I love the art in For All Seasons so much.
Yeah, it's like Tim Sale, isn't it?
Tim Sale. Yeah,
I feel like Tim Sale's visual depiction of Superman matches Frank
so
Whiteley's.
cool. It's really cool. Like I for some reason when I first started reading it, I kind of got a fear of like new X-Men art from this, which like new X-Men has some like really good standout art, but it's not. Yeah. But I think that the All Star Superman art is like very very good. Obviously, I think the Tim Sale art is magnificent, so I would definitely recommend it for all seasons.
Yeah, and Kryptonite, which is also drawn by Tim Sale.
I haven't read For All Seasons, but I've read Superman Kryptonite.
Yeah.
And that was a lot of fun.
Told from the perspective of a Kryptonite.
That's cool. Yeah.
It's a lot of fun. I think because just before reading this, I watched My Adventures with Superman, which introduced me to a lot of characters and lore and ideas. Even though the villains are very different, I think that's one of my favorite.
I know you'd recommend Leon. I know you'd recommend the Christopher Reeve movie.
Yeah. I think, apart from the details of his origin in this, the Christopher Reeve movie is like, if you watch that, you can kind of read like most Superman comics, and that is kind of the version of the origin that we all know. And it has, in a different way, it gives you everything you want from Superman.
True. Didn't Kevin Feige say that Christopher Reeve Superman is like the blueprint for all like Marvel superhero movies?
I don't know.
Which is really cool.
Heard that, but
that's really cool.
Interesting.
Yeah. But yeah,
I'm just seeing if I've got any other notes. Grant Morrison said that Luthor is also meant to be from Smallville, which I'm like, I didn't think that.
I didn't catch that at all.
Well, no, I don't think it's said, but I think in some versions he's from Metropolis, and in some versions he's from Smallville. Okay. So I'm not sure how I feel about that, because I don't like the idea of them being so linked from
like a Megamind,
like that. But the idea that they could be from the same place and come out so different is also interesting.
True. Yeah. No, I get. Well, what would you guys give All Star Superman? How many labels would you give it out of 12?
I'd probably give it. I'm finding it hard to give it less than 12 out of 12 labels.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me this is a pretty perfect Superman story. Like, I don't know, maybe it is paced more like a TV show than a graphic novel, and I think that was your issue with it. But I think. Maybe I just went into it knowing that, expecting that kind of. So, I think I like the scale of it. I like how it goes from kind of big sci-fi epic kind of ideas to like just this smaller scale, like Smallville, and then the Daily Planet, and then Clark and Lois, and kind of like I like how it's going like shrinking to kind of intimate relationships, and then like back out to like space and Zabaro.
It like exemplifies everything about Superman, from like the personal things to the massive things. Because I think Grant Morrison is underrated in their ability to write like regular conversations and stuff. Like they're so good at that, but it's always in there with a bunch of this other crazy stuff that you notice. But they're also so good at that. Do you want, as a final reveal, what the 12 labors were?
Yes.
As stated by Grant Morrison.
Yeah.
So the first one is Superman saves the first man mission to the sun.
Makes sense.
2, Superman brews the super elixir.
Yeah.
Right.
3, Superman answers the unanswerable question.
Ultra Sphinx.
Yep. 4, Superman chains the chronovore.
Yeah.
5, Superman saves Earth from Bizarro home.
Nice.
6, Superman returns from the Underverse. 7, Superman creates life, which is Earth Q. Yeah,
so
us.
Superman is God.
Yeah.
Created us.
Crazy.
The whole world in his hands.
Yeah, true. My God.
Yeah. Superman liberates Kandor / cures cancer is number 8. So that's both in one.
Damn.
9 is Superman defeats Solaris, the tyrant's son.
Yeah.
10 is Superman conquers death. 11, Superman builds an artificial heart for the sun. And 12, Superman leaves the recipe/formula to make Superman 2.
Amazing.
So,
Wow.
is there still
Essential reading. You know, if you're gonna go into this new Superman movie, I think that this is one you definitely got to read.
Yeah, I mean, they've talked about it a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like how they started doing that, to be honest.
Yeah, me
I mean,
too,
I don't
me
know
too.
when this started. Obviously, Matt Reeves' Batman had that as well.
Yeah.
Maybe it's just like this new director that James
Although
Gunn's got.
usually when they do a Batman, they point you towards The Long Halloween and
Yeah, they always say the same.
And,
Like,
Year
Yeah,
One.
but-
and Year
So-
One. Yeah.
I do think there was maybe more to the Batman.
Yeah,
It was
well,
credited.
The
but-
Batman was basically
yeah.
the same, just added Batman Ego as well. Yeah. But
But I don't actually see the connection there.
Batman Ego.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
that's-
think this is a real tangent now, but I think it's I think I haven't even read Batman Ego, but I think it's like a basis for how he wrote Batman as a character. Like it's not in the story literally, but it's like it was a big inspiration.
I think it's the way that he like divides Bruce Wayne and Batman.
Yeah.
I think is based on Batman Ego. But recommend essential
recommend.
reading. Yeah, definitely do it.
If you've never read Superman before, it's still a good one.
Yeah, a lot of
Yeah,
people.
yeah.
I've heard people say, "Don't start with this," but I don't agree.
Yeah, definitely do stuff like this.
Just read it. Like, sure, you might be confused at some point, but you pick it up, you figure it out.
If you thought I'm never going to read this and then listen to this and thought, well, now I'm spoiled, you'll be fine too.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's good enough that the spoilers don't matter.
Because the premise, like Superman is dying, it's not like it's at the end.
Yeah.
It's not like a reveal at the end. Like it's the beginning.
Yeah.
Like you will know that within the first page. So yeah, definitely recommend. Definitely.
And there's so much more to get out of it that we haven't said. As well.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right, are we done then?
Yeah,
I think we are.
Okay.
Thank you for tuning in this week.
Yeah.
Please enjoy.
Do we ask people to leave a review?
Yeah,
on
leave a
Spotify?
review.
Yeah.
Leave
I think
a review. Wait,
just
it's on
from other
Spotify.
podcasts
Wait,
I've listened to.
What platforms is this on?
Spotify, I think. Or maybe
Spotify, Apple. Yeah, leave a
YouTube.
review. Follow us on Instagram.
Yeah.
What's our handle?
At the Morrison.
At the Morrison Run.
Yeah.
Yep. DM us. But it might get back to you. All right.
Yeah.
Thank you for tuning in and have the great rest of your day.
Bye.
Bye.
Yeah, have a great rest of your
Have a great day.
Thank you so much for listening. I'm just throwing this bit in afterwards to say that next week we'll be discussing Kill Your Boyfriend, which if you can get a hold of it and want to read along with us, it's only one issue. It's a pretty quick and easy read and it's a lot of fun. So other than that, I just want to say that since recording, I have looked into it and leaving a review seems like the best way to help other people find this podcast. So if you enjoyed it, it would be really appreciated if you did that. I think that's everything. So thanks again and goodbye.